Maggie Hamling was the first artist to have a residency at the National Portrait Gallery in 1980. She is legendary, and she's just a spitfire and has created really controversial public sculptures. I asked for an interview and she said, okay. And there's an amazing segment with her in the episode where we went up to Suffolk.
Welcome to a new episode of Most Memorable Journeys. My guest today is a lady in the United States of America, but she has a German name. And I had to ask before how to pronounce it, because I know how to pronounce it, but sometimes it sounds different. She is a storyteller, a writer. She likes art and she likes food, and she has worked in communication for many, many years. And she is the founder, you are the founder of the WTAF Show. Welcome to Most Memorable Journeys, Kelly Groehler.
Thank you for having me, Elizabeth.
So we were just saying, it's morning where you are. How is life in Minnesota these days?
Well, it's typical weather in Minnesota, and we're just happy there's no snow on the ground anymore. So
well, definitely better here in Cyprus. So Kelly, you like to travel. You travel a lot, and you have kind of a travel bug. But you were born in the US. How did this happen? Were you influenced by somebody? Did you travel with your parents? How did you become a traveler?
Travel, that's a really interesting question. In fact, I've never been asked that specific question. I mean, travel, when you live in a place like the US where things are so expansive, we have so much territory and we have family all over the US. Travel for me started at a very early age in very simple ways. It was a 6-hour drive to go to see grandma and grandpa. There's a cult classic movie in the US called National Lampoon's Vacation. And the family are called the Griswolds, and they have a giant station wagon, and they're driving all over the US. And I grew up like the Griswolds. So we would get in the station wagon and we would drive out east and go to Cape Cod when I was 10 years old to see my aunt and uncle. But I didn't go international until I was 15 years old. And my first trip overseas was part of a field trip with other students, in fact, with other athletes. I'm a former runner. And there was a race on New Year's Day in Hyde Park in London. And so this field trip was built around this race on New Year's Day. And so I was a part of the group that went over to London. So I was 15 years old. I actually had injured my ankle that fall prior to the trip, so I didn't have to run. I just got to go on the trip. And I was a MTV nerd. In fact, I still am. I still want my MTV. And I, growing up and being so, especially in the 80s where you had the second British wave, as we called it in the US, all of the great music, coming out of the UK. And so found myself at that age, literally standing in the place that I dreamed about for years. And I fell madly in love with it. Fell in love with, both the history, the current culture at the time. And it's a true story. I spent the final 48 hours trying to find a legal way to stay in the UK and not go home. Of course, I didn't tell my parents that until about a decade later, but I was this close to just staying and
asking for political asylum.
I guess you could say I was thinking about being a runaway, but it molded me. It molded me in so many ways that, I proceeded to go to college. I didn't do what I thought I would, which is I thought I would move to London as soon as I graduated high school, but instead found myself in a very successful corporate career where I traveled the world. And I found that traveling solo came easy for me, pretty fearless. I can count on one hand the number of bad travel experiences I've had. And so it's always been something that calls to me. And I'm very lucky in that my husband, we married when we were in our 30s. Same thing. He likes to travel the same way I do. We like to go off the beaten path. We like new experiences, and we raised our son to try everything once. So it's been a terrific life because of that first trip.
It's funny because my first trip abroad was to London. I was fascinated. I had never been on a plane before, and I got to London. We stayed for a week, did a lot of sightseeing, had a great time. And I think that's how I say it. I think that's when I sold my soul, for traveling, and it has never the desire has never left me ever since. So you were saying you traveled for work. You were in the corporate world and you traveled for work. Where did you travel to?
Went everywhere from a corporate standpoint, and I still do. I still have a day job where I'm currently working with a company. It's called Self-Esteem Brands, and they recently just merged with another fitness company called Orange Theory Fitness, and this new company is now the largest portfolio of fitness and health and wellness brands in the world. So I lead communications and public affairs for that company. The thing I like about that is that they're all over the world. 5,500 Anytime Fitness locations everywhere. So, but Europe was usually the main point from a business standpoint. But got down to Australia, especially when I was in the energy sector for a couple of years, and just have always been open to any location. I can't think of a place in the world, absent places where is major conflict unfolding, that I would say no to visit at least once.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. And I think a lot of places have a bad reputation from people who haven't even been there, who are just talking about it because they heard something and because they are afraid. And fear is a dream killer. Fear stops so many people from doing what they really, really want to do.
That is absolutely true. It is also something that so Diana, my co-host and director on the WTAF show, we talk about quite a bit. She's Jamaican, born and raised. We see, especially in the U.S., and I trust in other cultures as well, you'll see the travel warning lists that come out from the government, and I think that there's a lot of fear that is built into travel by governments, warning us to watch ourselves. You were saying a comment, I believe, earlier before we even started recording. People who have never been somewhere but are throwing caution to others: be safe, watch yourself. I find that an affront. I don't think people should be in the business of giving travel advice if they've never traveled or had an experience somewhere. And I will tell you, from an American standpoint, I had a lot of people who were concerned about filming in Jamaica, because we were not at an all-inclusive resort, or as Diana likes to call them, the compounds, where Americans go and stay on the compound, and they don't go out and experience the culture or meet the people or take in the rest of this beautiful place called Jamaica. And still we'll have arguments with people who say, well, it's just not safe to go there. How do you know? You've never been.
It's crazy.
Yeah, one of the things we aim to do with the show is break down some of those stereotypes around travel, especially for women. I think that the fear narrative is especially fed to women, and we're just not fans of it.
I agree. I think we are both in this group. There is this in the group, Facebook group, Women Solo Travel Over 50. And
style. Yes.
Sometimes when I have a little time, I read comments, and the things that people are worried about, or the things that people, I sometimes think, I can't believe that somebody is actually writing this, And I don't know where it comes from. I guess it is just insecurities, but it's a shame because it stops people from seeing the real place. As you say, in a compound, or if you just stay in a hotel and you don't go anywhere, that's not visiting a country. That's just, you could stay home. It would be cheaper in a hotel near you.
And this is in part why we created the WTAF show. When you look at media, when you look at content, and when I say content, I'm not talking about the influencers. I admire the 28-year-olds who are traveling and putting stuff on TikTok every 5 minutes. God bless, and wish I had done that when I was in my 20s. When you look generally at like the history of food and travel programming and content, there is a bifurcation. There is a definite split. The majority of content that you see that features women, they're standing in a kitchen. They're standing and stirring. They are preparing meals for their families. They're preparing meals for their guests. They are that's the space that has been created for women. And listen, there are some phenomenal women who are in that space. You have Ina Garten, the Barefoot Contessa here in the US. Nigella Lawson is one of my all-time favorites. So, but that's the space where women thrive. When you move over to food and travel, it's, there are examples here and there, but largely, and especially from a Western culture perspective, it is the domain of men. And Anthony Bourdain, I mean, Rick Steves was before Anthony Bourdain, but Anthony Bourdain really brought it, I think, into the pop culture mainstream. And then you had Andrew Zimmern, who was doing Bizarre Foods, which had, it wildly popular at the time in the US in particular, but also a bit, why is it bizarre? It's not bizarre to the people who live there every single day. It was very much pandering to that American fear mindset around travel, I think in a very successful way. But look today, you've got Phil Rosenthal, Somebody Feed Phil. I mean, he's just been renewed for a 7th season. You've got Stanley Tucci, Searching for Italy, an Oscar-winning actor. And then you move even like James May from, the Top Gear guys in the UK gets his own shows for traveling and food. It's the domain of men. And so if you think about being a woman, what sort of messages are you receiving in terms of your ability? Do you see yourself when you in those food and travel shows? Do you see yourself traveling? Now you really see the guys doing it, and you see a message that's telling you that this is your domain. You're in the kitchen cooking. And that's part of the narrative out there that we hope to bust up with what we're producing and the show that we create.
I never thought of that. That's why I love doing this podcast, because it's such a big eye opener, and that's why I love listening to people. It's true. It's true, because who should do travel and food? It should be a woman, as you say. And why is it men? That's a fascinating thought and a fascinating discovery for me. I think we need to do something about this.
Well, that's why we created the WTAF show. So we're, and I have to also just qualify by saying I am a giant fan of Anthony Bourdain. I was crazy about his programming. It floors me how popular it still is, even though those episodes now are pushing 10, 15, 20 years old. They're outdated. The places he visited have changed dramatically over the past 2 decades, politically, culturally, economically. We've all been through the pandemic. And so much has changed, since that time. And yet he's still held out there as the standard bearer. I came up with the idea for doing this show. I have been looking for ways to support women artists for the past 10 years, something above and beyond my corporate career, and have had a few entrepreneurial endeavors that, tried some things didn't work. And that's the whole point, I think, of being an entrepreneur, is get comfortable with failure and learn from it. And it was Mother's Day 2020. So it was in the US, that's in May, the month of May 2020, and couldn't travel. We were in lockdown worldwide. And so it was Mother's Day, and I'm like, okay, I wake up early, I have a cup of coffee. My son and husband are still asleep. I'm like, what do I want to do? I'm like, I've got the remote control. I'm going to watch some old episodes of No Reservations. And I sat down expecting to just have a lovely Sunday watching these shows. And within an hour, I was writing the business plan for this show, because it got under my skin in a way that it had never bothered me before, where I'm like, he's talking with men. He's talking with male chefs. He's talking with male artists. Where are the women? And so I started bouncing around and looking what else was out there. And you have, Samin Nosrat, a chef who wrote the cookbook Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. Netflix did a 4-part series that coincided with her cookbook. It's marvelous. It's so good. But it's a 4-part series, 4 episodes. That's it. You have Padma Lakshmi, who for years was the host of Top Chef in the US. She created a TV show called Taste of the Nation, which is on Hulu here in the US. But it's really more of a political statement about the power of immigration and how it created American culture. And the timing was coinciding with the US elections in 2020. You have Samantha Brown, who has been on the record on other podcasts and in media talking about the double standard, where, someone like Andrew Zimmern could have low numbers on audience, but would get renewed for another season. She wasn't given that same standard. she was cut after one season. So looking at what was out there, and then, laying on top of that, you have great, 500,000 member communities like Solo in Style on Facebook, where women are talking about solo travel over 50. And there are endless communities and groups out there. You've got Condé Nast Traveler, you've got Travel and Leisure. And I realize I'm speaking from a US perspective on this. And then on top of it, all of the influencers. It is so dang noisy out there. But when I started peeling back, what's really missing? It's the stories of artists and chefs in these places around the world through a women's lens. And so that's where we're focused. How do we inspire women to travel by showcasing stories of women who are doing great art and food experiences in places they can go and visit? And that's where we are today.
And where have you been? I know that you've been to London. Where else have you been? Or how was London?
London, we just dropped the London episode, ironically, on Mother's Day, 2024, here in the US. And that was our 6th episode. We started in New York, and the formula for the show is pretty simple. Because I've traveled the world, I know women around the world. And so the idea is, let's pick places and start with people we know and invite the people we know, the women we know, into the episode. And so we started in New York City, where we had a great conversation with Hall Rockefeller, who is an art collector and an advisor working to get more women to collect fine art. Jackie Greaves, Manda, and she is a food blogger. Interesting story. She's Jamaican, lived in Italy, and now is in Manhattan, and splits her time between all 3 places and blogs about food and does this amazing fusion of like Italian and Jamaican spices. It's crazy good. And then we went to Brooklyn, and it was Chef Nassim Al-Khani, who at age 60 opened a Persian restaurant called Sofra. And within the first week was reviewed in the New York Times. And she's on the Michelin star radar. She's on the James Beard radar. So that was our pilot, our very first episode. And then where we've gone subsequently, we went to Jamaica. We have been in Los Angeles. Diana did a trip to Ghana, which was very personal for her as a Jamaican of Ghanaian descent, kind of coming full circle in terms of the slave trade. Literally took ashes of her mom back to Ghana. It's a very moving episode. It's beautiful. And then we were in Atlanta. So, we're just getting started with this, and we're 100% self-produced and self-owned. We're starting with places where we can get to the stories, we can make impact. We're not afraid to ask for interviews. I'll give you an example. In London, my favorite artist is Maggie Hambling. And Maggie Hambling was the first artist to have a residency at the National Portrait Gallery in 1980. She is legendary, and she's just a spitfire and has created really controversial public sculptures. I asked for an interview, and she said, okay. And there's an amazing segment with her in the episode where we went up to Suffolk and literally standing on the beach with one of her sculptures. The idea, though, is that we want each episode, we want a woman to be able to watch us and go, oh my God, those are great places. It's not Big Ben. It's not Trafalgar Square for the millionth time. It's pubs that have been around for hundreds of years that are now owned by women. And what are the women doing to create great experiences at these pubs? It's women like Deborah Ives, Solo in Style. She joined us for Sunday Roast. It's speaking to what's going on with social media. So we invited this amazing food stylist who has an Instagram account. We went to a cheese market with her, and everything she bought at the market in our episode, you can go to Instagram and see the pasta sauce she made with those ingredients. So it's pulling together stories in interesting ways. We're not here to give you travel tips. We're not here to tell you about the best seat to get on a plane. But the idea is, when you go to places, take it in, have the experiences, seek out the women who are doing these great things. And then how is that a part of your wellness as a woman? Because we think that travel is an act of self-care. We're very strong. We're very much a feminist-driven program, and we want to encourage more women to travel.
Where can people see your show?
We are on YouTube. We have a channel on YouTube, the WTAF Show. And our name is a double entendre. So,
Yeah, I was
yeah,
wondering at the beginning, I thought, does this really mean what I think it means?
it does. It means that it absolutely means what the actual
Yes,
and
yes.
because it goes back to again that split between women in the kitchen and men traveling, and we're like, what the But it also stands for Women Travel Art Food. So, but yep, we're on YouTube, and we're all about the storytelling.
And are you hoping or interested to going bigger? Like, would you go on if Netflix contacted you? What would you say?
If Netflix contacted us, of course we would have a conversation.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We believe in keeping the production though independent, and keeping the ownership for ourselves on it, because we're women owned, and the ethos of the show and the focus on the women we're trying to reach. I mean, we're very focused on specific types of women with this programming, and we would absolutely love to license the content to a Netflix. My dream is you get on Delta, you're sitting in your flight, and Delta in-flight entertainment, you can watch our episodes there. That would be the dream. Ultimately we're open to all avenues. We're currently working with brands and starting to look at what user generated content will look like. And we're also investing in virtual reality experiences, because I mean there's a sizable number of women. And in fact, Elizabeth, maybe you saw this on the Solo and Style page. I put up a question about it. A lot of people don't travel, and they love the content, but they have barriers, whether it's financial or it's accessibility. There can be a number of reasons why people don't travel, and this is how they travel, is through this content. So we want to reach people. We're thinking about how we do it today, but how can we get to them 5-10 years from now too?
Interesting, because before we started recording, we were talking about you and the German name and where you originally, like everybody in the US, your ancestors came from somewhere. And you were telling me that your mom was partly from the Levant, which is where I am, which is here in this area, because Cyprus is part of Europe. It's a member of the European Union, but we are geographically in the Middle East. And I believe that you should do a show here, because you need to come here, because this is partly your home. And I know plenty of women that you could interview.
Well, I also saw that you are hosting a leadership retreat in early November, and I've already got a folder started with ideas for Cyprus.
And I owe you a reply. That's very good. Yes, because I'm working on it. I have most of it ready, because I used to be the director of the Global Women Club Cyprus. And 2 years ago, I had a big conference, and it was a conference. It was a full day conference, like the usual conference where people speak. But I added stuff to it. I added an excursion to it. I added a hike to it, because I may be many things. I'm a life coach and a hypnotherapist, but deep down, I'm a tour guide, and I will always be a tour guide. And whoever comes to Cyprus, whether it's a relative or a friend or somebody, I always want them to like it. So I take them to places.
Absolutely. No, you're on our list. And I mean that seriously. What I would love to have happen is we have an episode in Cyprus. It's not unlike what the episode that Diana did with Ghana, although quite different in terms of the tone and spirit. But the idea is, my mother didn't know about the connection to the Levant region until the year before she passed away. And so for me, it was an interesting place in the world that suddenly became something different for me. It became something suddenly where I'm like, I was very much drawn to it, and I want to learn more about the region. I want to understand its history. And so the idea of doing an episode there is very appealing, and it hits all of the right elements of the stories we want to bring forward. I want to spend time and talk with you about your history as a tour guide. I mean, I'm talking about things that have changed since the pandemic. I mean, you've been in the business for decades with travel, and I can only imagine what you've seen and observed in terms of women's behavior when it comes to travel, and what was it like in the 70s and the 80s compared to now in terms of women's attitudes, and like, were women doing solo travel back then? I mean, these are all questions I want to ask you.
I could tell you stories that will make your toes curl. No, I'm
I
joking.
love it. That's going to be great.
No, but I mean, of course, I started being a tour guide when I was 19 and a half. And because I was desperate, I wanted to be a tour guide. And I wanted to go to Greece. And I found a job because there was no internet. There was no, we had a phone in the house. And I put a small ad in a Swiss magazine. The magazines used to have those sections where you can put in, I don't know, sell furniture, do this, but find a
Yeah.
boyfriend, and there was, I don't know what the section was, but I put in there, can anybody help me find a job as a tour guide in Greece? And somebody called me.
Crazy. That's so
It's
awesome.
crazy. It's a crazy story. And, and this is when you look at the world today, and I mean, okay, I am 63, but I am not that old when you think how much the world has changed in this lifetime.
I'm 53, and there's so much that has changed since I was a teenager, but there's still so much that's the same as well. I don't feel 53.
No, neither do I. I don't.
It's
Of
like,
course.
and I think that that's part of it too. Is I'm actually, as we're continuing to do this show, thinking about who we actually are working to connect with, and getting myself into the frame of mind that says, okay, Kelly, you're in your 50s. It's even been interesting with even like Deborah's group with Solo and Style, and looking at that group and feeling like I don't belong in here, but I do. It's my mindset. It has nothing to do with the women who are in that group, but it's about how I view myself, and recognizing that, okay, I am middle-aged. I am a Gen Xer. I'm a careerist. I mean, when I talk about the types of women we want to appeal to with this content, we've got 7 different personas of women that we are working to target. I mean, we've got the empty nester, the woman whose family has now grown and flown the coop, and they're looking around going, I've got time to travel now. You've got the careerist. I mean, I have a friend who is a CEO of a Fortune 50 corporation, and I think of her when I think of, as we're putting these episodes together, is this speaking to her as someone who is busy as hell, travels a lot, mainly for work, but am I reaching her with these stories? We have entrepreneurs, women who are starting businesses. We have late bloomers, women who maybe thought of themselves as one thing here, but their mindset is shifting. We have I lovingly call them the PTO hoarders, the women who work in corporate America mainly, who think that saving all of their vacation time is a contest, and they're very proud of the fact that they have banked hundreds and hundreds of hours of PTO time. And I just scratch my head and I think there's no prize at the end of your career for having the most PT hours banked. I mean, I understand they can cash it out and have that money, but I'm like, well, you missed all of these opportunities to spend time elsewhere.
And
And
there is never a guarantee that you will stay well. There's never a guarantee that you will be healthy when you retire.
Exactly. I just, and so we're trying to think of content that can encourage them to go, maybe I should spend some of that bank of my vacation time. And then I had mentioned the women who can't travel, but we want them to feel like they are a part of the journey, that they're there with us.
Mm-hmm.
So there are very specific women we want to reach there, and I think good old fashioned storytelling is coming back finally. I think we've been so wrapped up, especially with TikTok and Instagram Reels, the selfie telling stories of see where I am. And we want to bring this back to more conversations while you're traveling with people who are there doing amazing things.
Yeah. And when I travel, I post a lot of stuff on social media. I'm one of those people who just post all the time. And when I travel, I post every day and I say good morning from wherever I am. And I don't know, maybe I get on some people's nerves, but there are so many people who tell me, you know, when you go somewhere, I always feel that you're taking me with you.
Yes. And that's the goal. That's the goal of doing it. That's the goal of even posting things is, it's not to brag or
No,
to show, oh, look at where I am. It's no, did
it's
you?
sharing. Because
Yeah,
it's all about sharing.
definitely.
And I
Definitely.
think so. Whoever is listening here today, it's called the WTAF Show, and it's available on YouTube. And we need more followers. We need people who are listening to that, and we need sponsors as well. I'm considering myself part of the business now.
Oh, thank you. Yay. Well, we need sponsors for the Cyprus episode.
Yes, yes, yes. We're going to have to start working on that. Now, Kelly, we don't have so much more time, but we managed to talk about this show very well, and I'm glad we did. But talk a little bit about you. Do you have a favorite? My podcast is called Most Memorable Journeys. Do you have a most memorable journey?
So I know it's easy to default to the London experience at age 15. That trip just changed me in so many ways. I think that there's something that when you're at that age, you're 15 years old, the world is ahead of you, but you still feel like a child. And something just happens at that age that I think really just sparks you. And that was my spark. My spark was age 15, and it just really it really changed me. But I also have to say, and it's funny because London was at the tail end of this trip as well. I took a break from full-time corporate America in 2015. I got to the top of a very, very large multinational corporation and was running communications for its energy sector. What I learned being at the very, very top inside a company that big and that large is that I really didn't like the politics. I didn't like what it took to be successful in that space. And that experience kind of broke me a little bit in terms of the type of work that I do inside corporate is corporate communications, it's reputation management, it's stakeholder engagement and advocacy. And I suddenly realized that I had to take a break from it because, and to this day, I'm very choosy now. I'm not going to use my skills to be an advocate for something I don't genuinely care about deep in my soul. And I had done that for a long time. And so when I took the break, we had to move. We had moved away from Minneapolis, and we were in fact moving back to Minneapolis. And we made a decision on a whim, and our son was 13 years old at the time. And we went to Uzès in southern France. And it was at the recommendation of a relative. And so we put all of our stuff in storage, sold the house, and got on a plane, flew to Charles de Gaulle, hopped a train, went down to Nîmes, got the car rental, and found ourselves in right outside Pont de Gard, and spent time just frolicking in southern France with a 13-year-old kid. And we had such a blast. And it was like the best reset button, after all of the stress and, everything that had happened. And it was like the best reset button for our family, for the three of us. And it was just absolutely beautiful and some of the best food I have ever eaten in my life. So it was an amazing trip. And then we wound up back up in Paris on Bastille Day, and that was crazy. And so that's probably going to go down as
The
right
most
alongside
memorable.
that 15-year-old trip to London, just because it was such a significant reset button for my marriage, for my relationship with our son, for my mindset on what my career would be. And if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be here right now talking with you.
Amazing, amazing. We're getting to the end, but one last question I have. Do you have a dream? What would be the dream show if there was no financial restriction?
I want to take our crew, and this is the thing about our show. There's four of us. And usually with the trips, there's only 3 of us who go. So it's myself, Diana, and then we have a camera guy who also does the sound and he does all the editing. And so we're a very lean team. I want to do to take 6 weeks. And I just want to go up and down Asia Pacific on that rim. I want to do South Korea. I want to stop in Japan. I want to go scuba diving in Okinawa badly. I want to get down into, Taiwan, Hong Kong, go down to Vietnam. I'd love to see Laos and Cambodia, and then hit down into Singapore. And I would like to end that trip on the island of Bintan. And there is a little eco resort right off the island, and have my son and husband meet us there. If I could do that, that would be awesome. And then out of that too, I could also get about 6 or 8 episodes filmed.
Amazing. I mean, that's probably, you have this so well planned in your mind that the universe has to deliver. It would be wrong not to. So I think I can see it with you in my mind as well.
Marvelous.
And that's the perfect ending to this podcast episode. Thank you so much for being on Most Memorable Journeys, Kelly Groehler.
Thank you so much.
If you enjoy my podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. You will find all the information in the show notes.